My hands trembled as I turned the final page of the fragment. The words were written in blood that still glistened wet after 4 centuries. As I read the prophecy aloud, the temperature dropped 40 degrees in an instant. The candles extinguished themselves, and in the darkness, I heard it, a child's laughter, ancient and terrible, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. Then I felt a small hand on my shoulder. I turned to see a boy, no more than 7 years old, with eyes as black as the void between stars. "You called me," he whispered with a smile that revealed too many teeth. "And now the promise must be fulfilled." Hello everyone, and welcome to another terrifying tale. Before we descend into this nightmare, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Also, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is in your location right now. I love hearing from you all around the world. Now, turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself for the most disturbing story I've ever encountered. The Lost Fragment of Codex 666. My name is Samuel Blackwood, and I am writing this account in the year of our Lord 1604, though I fear these words may be my last. What I have discovered in the depths of the St. Malachy Monastery has shaken the very foundations of my faith and my understanding of the world. I am a scholar of ancient texts, a collector of forbidden knowledge, and I have always believed that understanding darkness is the first step to defeating it. I was wrong. Some knowledge should remain buried, some texts should never be read, and some promises should never be spoken aloud. I arrived at the monastery on a cold October morning, when the mist hung so thick over the Massachusetts wilderness that I could barely see my horse's head before me. The monastery itself was relatively new, built only 15 years prior by a group of monks who had fled persecution in Europe. They sought isolation in the New World, a place where they could practice their devotions without interference. The structure was modest compared to the great cathedrals of the old country, but it had a certain austere beauty, with its grey stone walls rising from the forest like a prayer rendered in rock. Brother Thomas greeted me at the gate. He was a small man with nervous eyes that darted constantly, as if searching for something he hoped never to find. "Master Blackwood," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We received your letter. Prior Gregory is expecting you, though I must confess, he has been troubled since we discovered the chamber." "The chamber?" I asked, my curiosity immediately piqued. Brother Thomas glanced over his shoulder before responding. "Perhaps it is better that the prior explain. Some things are difficult to speak of in daylight." He led me through corridors that smelled of incense and damp stone, deeper into the monastery than I would have expected for a greeting. The walls here were unadorned, save for the occasional crucifix, and I noticed that many of these were hanging upside down. When I pointed this out, Brother Thomas went pale. "We keep fixing them," he said quietly. "Every morning, we find them inverted. We've tried securing them with nails, with wire, with every method we can devise. But they always turn." He wouldn't meet my eyes as he spoke. Prior Gregory awaited me in his study, a room lined with books and illuminated by a dozen candles despite the morning hour. He was older than I expected, perhaps 70 years, with a long white beard and eyes that held a profound sadness. "Master Blackwood," he greeted me, gesturing to a chair. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Your reputation as a scholar of ancient texts preceded you. What I am about to show you requires someone with your particular expertise and, dare I say, your fortitude." "Your letter mentioned a discovery," I prompted. "Something that frightened your brothers." "Frightened?" The prior laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That is too gentle a word, Master Blackwood. What we found has driven 2 of our order to madness and 1 to suicide. Brother Marcus threw himself from the bell tower 3 days ago, screaming that the child was coming." He paused, his hands trembling as he poured wine for us both. "We were expanding the crypts beneath the monastery, you understand. We did not expect to have need of them so soon, but the winters here are harsh, and we've lost several brothers to illness. The ground freezes solid, making burial impossible until spring. And you found something during the excavation." "We found a chamber," Prior Gregory said, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "A chamber that should not exist. This land was wilderness before we came, untouched by Christian hands. Yet beneath our monastery, we discovered a room that is clearly man-made, carved from the living rock with symbols and writing that predate our presence here by centuries, perhaps millennia." My heart quickened. This was exactly the sort of discovery that had driven my life's work. "What kind of symbols?" The prior reached into his desk and withdrew a piece of parchment covered in sketches. Even the copies made my skin crawl. The symbols were unlike anything I had seen in my years of study, yet they felt somehow familiar, as if they spoke to some primal part of my consciousness that existed before language, before civilization. They twisted and writhed on the page, and I had to look away after a moment, feeling dizzy. "There is writing as well," the prior continued. "In Latin, but also in languages I do not recognize. And there is a book, or rather, a fragment of a book." He paused, and I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "It calls itself Codex 666. The name sent a chill down my spine. In the ancient Hebrew tradition, numbers held mystical significance. 6 was the number of man, created on the sixth day. But 666, triple sixed, was known as the number of the beast, the mark of ultimate evil mentioned in the book of Revelation. A codex bearing that name is precisely what it claims to be," the prior interrupted. "A manual for summoning the Antichrist. Or so it appears. Master Blackwood, I have served God for 50 years. I have studied scripture and theology. I have debated with scholars and heretics alike. But I have never felt evil as a tangible presence until I entered that chamber. The very air feels wrong there, as if reality itself is somehow thinner, as if something pressing against the fabric of our world from the other side. I would very much like to see this chamber," I said, though a part of me screamed to flee, to leave this place and never look back. The prior studied me for a long moment. "I had hoped you would say that, though I fear I may be condemning you by granting your wish." "Very well. But first, you must understand something. The fragment is incomplete. It is only 33 pages of what was clearly a much larger work. The pages we have described certain preparations, certain rituals, and a promise. But they do not tell us who created this text or how it came to be buried beneath land that was supposedly virgin wilderness." He stood, taking a candlestick from his desk. "Come. It is best to see it in person. Words fail to capture the true nature of what we found." We descended into the crypts, Brother Thomas joining us with visible reluctance. The air grew colder with each step, and I noticed frost forming on the stone walls despite it being only October. The crypts themselves were orderly enough, with niches carved into the walls for the dead. But at the far end, a newly broken wall revealed a passage leading deeper still. "We broke through here," the prior explained, holding his candle high. Brother Marcus was supervising the work. He was the first to enter. When he came back out, he was laughing and crying at the same time, and his hair had gone completely white. He was only 30 years old. The passage beyond was narrow, forcing us to walk single file. The walls here were covered in those disturbing symbols, carved deep into the rock. And they seemed to move in the candlelight, writhing like living things. I reached out to touch one and jerked my hand back as if burned, though the stone was ice cold. The chamber, when we reached it, was approximately 30 feet in diameter, with a domed ceiling that rose to a point in the center. The floor was perfectly level and inlaid with a massive symbol that took my breath away, a hexagram within a circle, with additional symbols at each point that I recognized from ancient Babylonian texts. At the center of the symbol was a stone pedestal, and on that pedestal lay the fragment. Even from the doorway, I could see it clearly. The pages were bound in what appeared to be human skin, darkened with age but remarkably well preserved. The binding was held together with metal clasps that looked like tarnished silver, and the whole thing radiated a palpable aura of wrongness. "We haven't moved it," the prior said. "We thought it safer to leave it where we found it." The two brothers who tried to carry it out suffered terrible nightmares for days afterward. One of them, Brother Paul, still hasn't spoken a coherent word since. I approached the pedestal slowly, my scholarly instincts warring with my sense of self-preservation. The closer I got, the more I felt a pressure in my head, as if something was pushing against my thoughts, trying to force its way into my mind. The candles flickered, though there was no breeze in this sealed chamber. The fragment lay open to a page covered in Latin text. The handwriting was immaculate, each letter formed with obsessive precision. But the ink was unmistakably blood, and despite what had to be centuries of age, it still looked wet, still gleamed in the candlelight as if freshly applied. I leaned closer to read, and the words seemed to swim before my eyes. "Here begins the testimony of the dark promise, as revealed to the 13 by the one who comes before. In the year when the old world dies and the new world is born, when the innocent blood of the first people stains virgin soil, the seal shall weaken. The barrier between what is and what shall be will grow thin, and the path will open for the child of perdition." My hands trembled as I turned the page, unable to stop myself despite the growing sense of dread. The next page showed a diagram, a ritual circle identical to the one inlaid in the floor, surrounded by text describing the necessary preparations. It spoke of sacrifices, of specific dates when the veil between worlds was thinnest, of words that must be spoken in tongues dead for millennia. Prior Gregory, I said, my voice hoarse. This text mentions the new world. It speaks of virgin soil and the blood of first peoples. This was written before the Europeans came to these shores. Yet the English only arrived in these regions in the last 20 years. I know, the prior replied grimly, which means someone predicted our coming centuries ago. Or worse, orchestrated it. I continued reading, page after page of increasingly disturbing content. The fragment described in detail the nature of the Antichrist, not as some spiritual concept but as a literal being, a child who would be born of woman but fathered by something far older and far darker than Christian notions of the devil. It spoke of his powers, his purpose, and the promise made to those who would serve him, immortality, knowledge, power beyond human comprehension. But it was the final pages that truly chilled my blood. They contained a prophecy, dated to the year when 6 becomes 104, which I realized with growing horror was 1604, this very year. According to the prophecy, on the night when the veil was thinnest, the night of All Hallows' Eve, now just 3 weeks away, the child would be called forth if the proper rituals were performed and the proper words were spoken. This is why you summoned me, I said, looking up at the prior. You want me to decipher the final ritual, to understand how to prevent it from being completed. No, Master Blackwood, the prior said, and his voice was filled with despair. I summoned you because I fear we cannot prevent it. You see, the text says the ritual does not require willing participants. It merely requires that the words be spoken, by anyone, in this chamber, on that specific night. And once spoken, they cannot be unspoken. Then we seal the chamber, I said immediately. We collapse the tunnel, bury it so deep that no one can ever find it. We considered that. Brother Thomas spoke up for the first time since entering the chamber. But Brother Marcus, before his death, said something that haunts me. He said, the words are already out there, scattered on the wind, waiting for ears to hear them. The book is not the source, it is merely a guide to what already exists. I looked back at the fragment, and as I did, I noticed something I had missed before. In the margins of several pages were annotations in a different hand, written in English rather than Latin. I leaned closer to read them and felt my blood turn to ice. These annotations, I whispered, they're recent. Someone has been here, studying this text, making notes. And look, I pointed to a date scrawled at the bottom of one page. October 15th, 1604. That was just last week. The three of us stood in stunned silence. Then, from somewhere deep in the tunnels behind us, we heard it. A child's laughter, high and clear and utterly out of place in this tomb of ancient evil. The sound echoed off the stone walls, making it impossible to determine its source or direction. Sweet merciful Christ, Brother Thomas whispered, making the sign of the cross with shaking hands. It's already begun. We fled the chamber, our candles guttering in an impossible wind that seemed to chase us through the tunnels. The laughter followed, sometimes seeming close, sometimes distant, but always present. When we finally emerged into the crypts proper, we found them deserted. The other brothers, we learned later, had all heard the laughter too and had retreated to the chapel to pray. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my small cell, staring at the ceiling, while the events of the day churned through my mind. The fragment was real, the prophecy was specific, and if the annotations were to be believed, someone had been studying it recently, someone who presumably intended to fulfill the ritual described within its pages. But who? And why? What kind of person would seek to bring forth the Antichrist into the world? As I lay there, I became aware of a scratching sound coming from the wall beside my bed. It was rhythmic, persistent, like fingernails on stone. I sat up, lighting my candle, and watched in horror as letters began to appear on the wall, carved by invisible hands. The promise must be kept. The child must come. You cannot stop what has already begun. I scrambled from the bed, backing against the opposite wall. The scratching continued, the message growing longer. 13 made the pact. 13 sealed the promise. 13 will see it fulfilled. You are one of the 13. No, I whispered. I've made no pact. I serve no darkness. The scratching stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a new message appeared. The bloodline remembers what the man forgets. I ran from my cell, not caring that I was in my nightclothes, not caring about anything except getting away from that message. I burst into the prior's study without knocking, startling the old man from his prayers. My cell, I gasped. There's writing on the wall. It says I'm one of 13, that I'm connected to this somehow. The prior's face went gray. Show me. We returned to my cell, but the wall was blank. There was no sign of the scratching, no evidence of the message that had been carved there moments before. The prior touched the wall, running his fingers over the smooth stone. It was there, I insisted. I saw it being written. I believe you, the prior said quietly. Master Blackwood, I must confess something. Your presence here was not entirely due to your reputation as a scholar. When we discovered the chamber, I found a list hidden in a compartment beneath the pedestal. 13 names, written in that same blood ink that never dries. Your name was on that list. So was mine. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. What are you saying? I'm saying that we are connected to this, whether we wish to be or not. Our ancestors, or perhaps we ourselves in ways we don't understand, are part of the dark promise. The fragment called to us specifically. It wanted us to find it. Then we destroy it, I said, desperation making my voice harsh. We burn it, regardless of the consequences. We tried, the prior admitted. On the first night after we discovered it, I took it from the chamber and held it in a fire for an hour. The flames did not touch it. The pages did not even warm. Then, the next morning, it was back on the pedestal, as if it had never been moved. Over the following days, I threw myself into studying every text the monastery possessed, searching for some way to break the connection, to prevent the prophecy from being fulfilled. But the more I learned, the more hopeless our situation appeared. The dark promise, I discovered, was an ancient pact made by 13 individuals in a time before recorded history. They had sought power from an entity that existed outside of normal space and time, an entity that would eventually manifest as the Antichrist. The pact required 13 bloodlines to be maintained across the centuries, with at least one descendant from each line alive when the prophesied time arrived. If all 13 were present in the same location on All Hallows' Eve, and if the words of summoning from the fragment were spoken, the barrier would fall and the child would be born into the world. But I don't want this, I told the prior one evening as we sat in his study, both of us looking haggard from lack of sleep. I never agreed to any pact. Neither did I, he replied. But our ancestors did, and the sins of the fathers are visited upon the sons. The question is not whether we can escape our heritage, but whether we can prevent the ritual from being completed. How many of the 13 have gathered here? I asked. The prior pulled out the list we had found. As far as I can determine, 5 of us are currently at the monastery. You, myself, Brother Marcus before his death, Brother Paul who still won't speak, and Brother James. That's only half. Perhaps if the others don't arrive, the ritual cannot be completed. But even as he spoke, there came a knocking at the monastery gate. Brother Thomas answered it and returned with astonishing news. 5 travelers had arrived, all claiming to have received letters summoning them to the monastery for a gathering of utmost importance. The letters bore no signature, but all 5 travelers insisted they felt compelled to come, as if called by a voice they couldn't quite hear but couldn't ignore. When the prior reviewed their names, his hands began to shake. All 5 were on the list of 13. With Brother Marcus's death, 12 of the bloodlines were now represented within the monastery walls. Only one more, I whispered. Who is the 13th? The prior's eyes met mine, and I saw in them a terrible realization. Brother Marcus had a son, from before he took his vows. The boy was raised by monks in England. His name is Michael, and according to the last letter Marcus received, the child was sent to the colonies 6 months ago. He would be. The prior paused, checking a document on his desk. 13 years old now. Where is he? I demanded. I don't know. The letter said he was placed with a family in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, but it didn't specify which family or where. As if in answer to my question, the child's laughter echoed through the monastery again, clearer and closer than ever before. This time, I could hear words within the laughter. I'm coming. I'm almost home. All Hallows' Eve was 3 days away. The atmosphere in the monastery grew increasingly oppressive as the date approached. The gathered descendants of the 13 bloodlines were housed in separate cells, though none of us could sleep. We spent our days in prayer and our nights listening to the sounds that now filled the monastery, footsteps in empty corridors, whispers in unknown languages, and always, always, that terrible child's laughter. Objects moved on their own. Books flew from shelves. The crucifixes no longer merely inverted themselves but now twisted into obscene shapes. One brother swore he saw a figure in one of the corridors, a young boy with eyes like black pits, watching him with a smile that promised terrible things. On the eve of All Hallows, the prior gathered us all in the chapel. There were 12 of us, 12 descendants of the original 13 who had made the dark promise. We must leave, the prior declared. All of us, together, as far from this place as we can get before midnight tomorrow. Perhaps if we are not here, if we are not in the chamber when the appointed time comes, the ritual cannot be completed. But as we prepared to depart, we discovered that the monastery gates would not open. They weren't locked or barred, they simply would not move, as if held by invisible hands of impossible strength. We tried the windows, but they too refused to open. We were trapped, exactly where the dark promise wanted us to be. That night, as I lay in my cell accepting that there was no escape, I heard a small voice beside my bed. "Master Blackwood, are you awake?" I turned to see a boy standing in the darkness of my cell, though I had heard no door open. He appeared to be about 13 years old, with dark hair and pale skin. His eyes, in the dim light, looked normal enough, but there was something ancient in his expression, something that no child should possess. "Who are you?" I asked, though I feared I already knew. "I'm Michael," the boy said simply. "Brother Marcus's son. I've been living in the village, but tonight I felt called to come here. Do you know why?" "You must leave," I said urgently, sitting up. "You're in terrible danger." "We all are." The boy tilted his head, studying me with those two old eyes. "I don't think I can leave, Master Blackwood. I think I've always been meant to be here, on this night, in this place. Don't you feel it? The pull, the purpose, the promise. Fight it," I begged. "Whatever you feel, whatever voice you hear, fight it with everything you have." Michael smiled, and in that smile I saw something that made my blood freeze. "But Master Blackwood, why would I fight myself?" Before I could respond, the boy vanished, not through the door but simply fading from existence like morning mist before the sun. I scrambled from my bed and ran to the prior's study, bursting in without knocking. The old man looked up from his prayers, tears streaming down his face. "He's here," I gasped. "Michael is here, and prior, there's something wrong with him. Something terribly wrong." "I know," the prior whispered. "He came to me as well. Samuel, I don't think the child is possessed. I think he's what was promised. The ritual doesn't summon the Antichrist. It provides him with a vessel, a human form to inhabit. And young Michael, being the final bloodline, being born of one of the 13, is the perfect host. Then what do we do?" The prior stood, his decision clearly made. "We go to the chamber. All of us. And we do the one thing that might still save Michael and the world, we offer ourselves instead. The dark promise requires 13 souls. Perhaps if we give ourselves willingly, the bargain will be satisfied, and the child can go free." "You're suggesting we sacrifice ourselves?" "I'm suggesting we fulfill our ancestors' debt in the only way that might matter. Our lives for the innocent. Isn't that what Christ did? Isn't that what we, as his servants, should be willing to do?" As midnight approached, all 12 of us gathered at the entrance to the hidden chamber. We carried candles and holy water, crosses and prayers, though we knew none of these would protect us from what was to come. Michael was waiting for us at the entrance, no longer bothering to hide his true nature. His eyes had gone completely black, and when he smiled, I could see that his teeth had sharpened to points. "You've all come," the thing wearing Michael's body said, its voice layered with harmonics that hurt to hear. "How delightful. The 13 are finally complete, after so many centuries. Do you know how long I've waited for this moment? How many generations have lived and died while I remained patient, always patient, knowing that eventually, the promise would be kept." "Release the boy," the prior commanded, holding his cross before him. "Take us instead. 13 willing souls for one innocent." The entity laughed, and it was the same terrible child's laughter we had heard echoing through the monastery. "But he is willing. Every cell in his body, every thought in his mind, has been prepared for this moment since before his conception. His father, Brother Marcus, thought he left his old life behind when he joined your order. But he brought his son into the world first, as he was compelled to do, as all of the 13 were compelled to continue their bloodlines. Everything has happened exactly as it was meant to happen. I don't believe in predestination," I said, stepping forward. "I believe in free will. Michael, if you're still in there, fight this thing. You have a choice." For just a moment, the black faded from the boy's eyes, and I saw genuine terror there. I can't stop it. It's too strong. It's been with me my whole life, whispering, guiding, preparing me. Master Blackwood, please, help me." But then the darkness rushed back, and the entity's voice returned, colder and harder than before. Foolish scholar. The boy is right, he cannot stop what he has always been. And neither can you. Now, shall we proceed with the ritual? The fragment has been quite specific about what must happen next. It gestured, and against our will, all 12 of us began walking toward the chamber. Our legs moved without our consent, carrying us down into the depths where the fragment lay waiting on its pedestal. The entity wearing Michael's body followed, humming a tune that might have been a lullaby if it hadn't been in a language dead for thousands of years. In the chamber, we found ourselves arranging in a circle around the pedestal, each of us standing on one of the 12 outer points of the symbol inlaid in the floor. Michael, or the thing controlling him, took his place at the center, directly before the fragment. Now, the entity said, picking up the fragment with Michael's small hands, we read the words of summoning. And when they are complete, this vessel will be transformed, made perfect, made ready to walk among humanity and lead them into glorious darkness. Some of you will serve me. Others will simply die. But all of you will witness the birth of a new age. It began to read, and the words that came from Michael's mouth were like knives in our ears. They were words never meant to be spoken by human tongues, words that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. The air in the chamber grew thick and viscous, and the temperature plummeted until our breath came out in great clouds of frost. The symbols on the floor began to glow, first faintly, then with increasing intensity until they were almost blinding. I felt something pulling at me, as if hooks had been sunk into my very soul and were slowly reeling me towards some dark abyss. Around the circle, the others felt it too. I could see the agony on their faces, hear their screams mixing with the terrible words of the summoning. The fragment's pages began to turn on their own, faster and faster, the blood ink seeming to lift off the pages and swirl through the air like a crimson mist. And in that mist, I began to see things, visions of the future, of a world transformed by the presence of the entity that was even now being fully birthed into Michael's body. I saw cities burning. I saw people worshipping at altars of bone and blood. I saw the sky turning the color of a bruise, and stars falling like rain. I saw the child, grown into a man of terrible beauty, standing before crowds of millions who chanted his name with religious fervor. I saw the end of everything we knew, everything we loved, everything we had tried to protect. No, I heard myself saying, though my voice seemed to come from very far away, this cannot be. This will not be. I don't know where I found the strength. Perhaps it was God's grace, perhaps it was simple human stubbornness, or perhaps it was the realization that sometimes the only way to save the world is to destroy yourself trying. But I broke free of the invisible bonds holding me in place and lunged forward, not toward Michael, but toward the fragment itself. My hands closed on the ancient pages, and immediately I felt agony beyond anything I had ever imagined. The blood ink seared my flesh like acid, and I could feel the accumulated evil of centuries pouring into me, trying to corrupt me, to break my will and make me another servant of the dark promise. But I held on. The words must be spoken to completion, the entity screamed, and I realized with triumph that my interruption had broken the ritual's momentum. Release the fragment, you fool. You don't understand what you're interfering with. I understand enough, I gasped, my hands burning, my vision going dark around the edges. I understand that sometimes, to stop evil, you must take it into yourself. The prior was right, someone must pay the debt. Let it be me. With my last strength, I did something that should have been impossible. I ripped the fragment in half. The pages tore with a sound like a human scream, and the blood ink sprayed across the chamber like a fountain. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The entity's control over Michael shattered. The boy collapsed, freed from the possession but unconscious. The symbols on the floor cracked and went dark. And the accumulated power of the ritual, with nowhere to go, nowhere to manifest, turned inward on itself. The chamber began to shake. Cracks appeared in the walls and ceiling. The pedestal split in two, and from the cracks, a darkness began to seep, not the absence of light, but a presence of shadow, thick and malevolent. Run, the prior shouted, and we did, grabbing Michael's unconscious form and fleeing up the tunnel as the chamber collapsed behind us. The darkness followed, trying to catch us, to drag us back, but we were faster. We emerged into the crypts just as the entire hidden complex gave way, tons of rock and earth filling the passage and sealing the chamber forever. We collapsed in the monastery's chapel, all of us burned and bloodied but alive. Michael stirred, his eyes opening, truly his own eyes now, brown and clear and filled with the confusion of a frightened child. What happened? He asked weakly. Why am I here? The prior gathered the boy into his arms, tears streaming down his face. You're safe now, child. You're free. As for me, I looked down at my hands and saw that the blood ink had left marks, strange symbols burned into my palms that I recognized from the fragment. The text I had touched, the evil I had absorbed to break the ritual, had left its mark on me. I could feel it inside me, a cold presence that whispered in languages I didn't know but somehow understood. "Prior," I said quietly, "I don't think I can stay here. What I did, what I took into myself, it's still there. Still waiting. I can feel it trying to influence my thoughts, my actions." The prior looked at me with profound sadness. "What will you do?" "I'll go into the wilderness," I decided. "Far from civilization, far from anyone I might harm. And I'll spend whatever time I have left fighting this darkness, keeping it contained. It's the price of what I did, and I'll pay it willingly." "Will you write about what happened here?" the prior asked. "So that others might know, might be warned." "I am writing it even now," I said, gesturing to the manuscript I had been composing throughout our ordeal. "Though I fear who might read it and what they might learn from it. Knowledge of evil is itself a form of evil." That was 20 years ago. I am writing these final words from a cave deep in the wilderness, far from any human habitation. The marks on my hands have spread over the years, covering my arms, my chest, slowly creeping toward my heart. The whispers have grown louder, and some days it takes all my will to resist them. The fragment was destroyed, the ritual was broken, and Michael, whom I visited once, 5 years ago, has grown into a good young man with no memory of that terrible night. The dark promise was not fulfilled, at least not in the way it was intended. But I wonder sometimes if it truly failed, or if it simply took a different path. I carry the knowledge now, the words, the power that was meant to birth the Antichrist. It's inside me, forever part of me. And when I die, which will be soon, I can feel it. What happens to that knowledge? Does it die with me, or does it return to wherever it came from, waiting for another opportunity, another 13 bloodlines, another attempt? I suppose I'll have my answer soon enough. The whispers are growing very loud now, and the symbols on my skin are almost complete. Soon they will reach my heart, and then. If you are reading this, know that evil is real, that it is patient beyond human comprehension, and that the price of fighting it is often everything you have. Know that some knowledge should remain buried, some texts should never be read, and some promises should never be made, no matter how desperate you become. And know this, Michael survived, the world continued, and the darkness was held back, at least for a time. That is enough. That must be enough. The candle is guttering now, and the darkness is pressing close. I can see shapes in the shadows, figures that aren't quite there. I can hear that terrible child's laughter again, though I don't know if it's real or just the echo in my corrupted mind. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to whoever finds this manuscript. I'm sorry for the burden of knowledge it represents. But someone needed to know what happened at St. Malachy Monastery in the year 1604. Someone needed to understand that the fight against darkness never truly ends, it only changes form. The laughter is very close now. I can feel small hands on my shoulders, cold as ice. When I look up, I see him, the child that Michael could have become, the Antichrist that was promised but never fully born. He exists now only in the space between what is and what might have been, trapped in a half-existence by my interference. "You should have let me be born," the specter whispers. "At least then, the story would have an ending. But now I'm caught, and you're caught, and we'll both remain here in this liminal space forever. Did you think you were saving the world, Samuel Blackwood? Or were you just delaying the inevitable? I don't have an answer." The candle goes out, and in the darkness, I feel myself being pulled somewhere else, somewhere between life and death, between this world and the next. The symbols on my skin burn with cold fire, and I realize with terrible clarity that my story isn't ending, it's transforming into something new. But before I go, before I'm taken to wherever it is that people like me end up, I want to leave one final warning. The fragment was only that, a fragment. There are other pieces out there, scattered across the world, waiting to be found. Each contains a part of the knowledge, a piece of the ritual. And there are always those who seek power, who believe they can control what they summon, who think they're strong enough to wield darkness without being consumed by it. They're wrong. We're all wrong. The darkness doesn't need our permission or our rituals. It's always there, always waiting, always patient. The dark promise wasn't just about summoning the Antichrist, it was about showing humanity that we carry the seeds of our own destruction within us. Every time we choose power over compassion, knowledge over wisdom, ambition over love, we take another step toward fulfilling the promise ourselves. Michael was saved, yes. But how many other children are out there right now, being groomed by forces they don't understand for purposes they can't comprehend. How many bloodlines carry the taint of ancient pacts made by ancestors who thought they could cheat death, escape consequence, or gain power without cost? The answer terrifies me, all of us. We all carry darkness within us. The question is not whether it exists, but what we choose to do with it. I chose to take it into myself, to become a container for evil so that others wouldn't have to bear that burden. Was it the right choice? I don't know. God, if you're listening, I hope it was. I hope that my sacrifice meant something, that the years I've spent in this wilderness, fighting the whispers and the visions and the terrible knowledge, have kept the world safe for just a little longer. The prior died 10 years ago, peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by brothers who loved him. He never stopped praying for me, I learned. Brother Thomas took over as prior and has continued the work of keeping the monastery a place of light in the darkness. The other descendants of the 13 bloodlines scattered after that night, and as far as I know, none of them have been troubled by the dark promise again. Michael, when I last saw him, had become a teacher. He works with children, helping them learn to read and write, giving them the tools to understand their world. He doesn't remember that terrible night, or if he does, he's buried it so deep that it can't hurt him anymore. He's a good man, doing good work, and that is the victory we fought for. Was it worth the cost? Would I make the same choice again, knowing what I know now, feeling what I feel now? Yes. 1,000 times, yes. Because in the end, that's what it means to be human. To stand against the darkness, even when you know you can't win, even when you know it will destroy you, simply because it's the right thing to do. That's the promise we should be making, not to darkness, but to each other, to the generations that come after us, to the world that gave us life. The shapes in the darkness are very close now. I can feel them touching me, their fingers like ice, their breath like winter wind. The child specter stands before me, and his face is shifting, becoming something else, something older and far more terrible. It's time, Samuel, he says, and his voice is no longer that of a child but of something that existed before time itself. Your 20 years are up. The debt must be paid, the balance must be restored. You took the fragment's power into yourself, and now you must give something back. Take what you need, I say, surprising myself with how calm I sound. But leave the world alone. That's all I ask. Leave them alone. The thing that was once the child specter tilts its head, considering. I make no promises, it says. But your sacrifice will be noted. Your resistance will be remembered. And perhaps, when the will turns again, when the next crisis comes, your example will inspire another to stand against the darkness, as you did. That's all I can hope for, I suppose. That this manuscript will survive, that someone will find it and read it and understand that the fight is never over, but neither is hope. That every generation must face its own darkness, but every generation also has the strength to overcome it, if they choose. The symbols on my chest have reached my heart now. I can feel them burning there, cold fire that spreads through my veins like ice water. My vision is fading, the world becoming gray and indistinct. But I'm not afraid. I've been preparing for this moment for 20 years, and I'm ready. As the darkness claims me, I see one final vision. It's the monastery, St. Malachy, but in a time far from now. The building is in ruins, reclaimed by the forest, nothing but broken walls and crumbling stone. But among the ruins, I see children playing, laughing, alive and innocent. They're building something new from the old stones, creating light where there was once darkness. And I understand then that this is the true victory. Not that darkness was defeated, it never truly is, but that life continues, that light persists, that hope remains. The monastery, built on a place of ancient evil, has become a place where children play. The cycle can be broken. The curse can be lifted. The promise can be refused. With my last breath, I write these final words. To whoever finds this manuscript, I charge you with a sacred duty. Burn it. Destroy it. Let the knowledge contained within these pages die with me. The world doesn't need to know the specifics of the dark promise, the details of the ritual, the names of the 13 bloodlines. All they need to know is this: evil is real. It is patient. It is powerful. But so is good. So is love. So is the human spirit's stubborn refusal to bow to darkness, no matter how overwhelming it seems. Stand against the darkness in whatever form it takes in your time. Don't do it because you'll win, you might not. Don't do it because it's easy, it never is. Do it because it's right, because someone has to, because if not you, then who? That's my final testament. That's my last will. That's the true promise. not the dark one I fought against, but the promise every human being makes when they choose to stand for light against the encroaching shadow. I am Samuel Blackwood. I was a scholar, a seeker of forbidden knowledge, and in the end, a guardian against the very darkness I once sought to understand. My body will die here in this cave, far from home and far from comfort. But my story, if you choose to heed it, can live on. Just remember, some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. Some knowledge, once gained, can never be forgotten. Choose wisely what you seek, and be prepared to pay the price for what you find. The candle is gone now. The darkness is complete. And in that darkness, I hear music, not the terrible harmonics of the summoning, but something else, something that might be beautiful if I could hear it properly. Is it angels? Or is it just the final firing of neurons in a brain deprived of oxygen? I don't know, and I find I don't care. I fought the good fight. I kept the faith. I finished the race. That is enough. That must be. The following addendum was found attached to Samuel Blackwood's manuscript when it was discovered in 1887 by a hunting party in the Massachusetts wilderness. It is written in a different hand, dated 1625. I am Father Thomas, formerly Brother Thomas, now Prior of St. Malachy Monastery. I write this 21 years after the events described in Master Blackwood's manuscript, which was delivered to me by a hunter who found his remains in a cave some 30 miles from here. Samuel Blackwood died as he lived, fighting darkness. The symbols he described covered his entire body, even his face, burned into his flesh like brands. But his expression, the hunter said, was peaceful. Whatever battle he fought in his final moments, it seems he found some measure of peace at the end. Michael, Brother Marcus's son, is now a man of 33, the same age as Christ when he was crucified. He has become a minister and works among the native peoples, bringing them the true gospel and, I hope, some measure of the light that was almost extinguished in him as a child. He knows nothing of his role in these events, and I pray he never does. The monastery continues its work. We have sealed the crypts permanently, filled them with concrete and blessed earth. Nothing will ever enter that chamber again, nor will anyone recover what was buried there. The fragment is gone, destroyed when Samuel tore it apart, and good riddance to it. But I must confess something that haunts me. 3 nights ago, on All Hallows' Eve, 21 years to the day after the ritual was broken, I heard laughter in the monastery. A child's laughter, clear and bright and terrible. When I investigated, I found a new mark on the wall of the sealed crypts, the number 666, written in what appeared to be fresh blood. I had it scrubbed away immediately, blessed the wall with holy water, and set a watch. But I fear that Samuel was right in his final writings. The darkness is patient. The promise may have been refused this time, but there will be other times, other opportunities, other 13 bloodlines gathering in other places. All we can do is remain vigilant, remain faithful, and remember the sacrifice of Samuel Blackwood, who gave everything to save a world that will never know his name. I have enclosed his manuscript in a sealed box, to be opened only by the prior of this monastery when he deems it necessary. May God grant that day never comes, but if it does, may whoever reads this be as brave and selfless as Samuel Blackwood proved to be. May his soul rest in peace, and may his sacrifice not be in vain. Father Thomas Prior of St. Malachy November 3, 1625 inch a second addendum, written in modern English and dated 2024, was found attached to the manuscript when it was acquired by the Smithsonian Institution's Department of Unusual Artifacts. This manuscript was discovered in the archives of St. Malachy Monastery, which was abandoned in 1871 after a fire destroyed most of the structure. The monastery was never rebuilt, and the site is now a protected historical landmark. Interestingly, records show that 13 different fires have been reported at the site over the past 150 years, all occurring on October 31. Local authorities have attributed this to vandalism, but no culprits have ever been caught. Furthermore, genealogical research has identified living descendants of the original 13 bloodlines mentioned in the manuscript. All 13 families still exist, scattered across the United States and Europe, though none of them appear to be aware of their connection to these events. The reader should note that this manuscript has been classified as historical fiction, as no credible evidence exists to support the supernatural events described within. However, certain details, the existence of the monastery, the names of some of the brothers, and the dates mentioned, align with historical records. We present this document as a fascinating example of early American Gothic literature and as a window into the fears and beliefs of the colonial period. However, it should be noted that 3 researchers who worked extensively with this manuscript have reported experiencing vivid nightmares involving a child with black eyes. All 3 requested to be removed from the project. Additionally, the original manuscript bears unusual stains that, despite our best efforts, we have been unable to identify or remove. They appear to be blood, but they don't match any known type, and they remain wet to the touch despite being nearly 400 years old. We recommend that future researchers handle this document with appropriate caution and respect. And so ends the testimony of Samuel Blackwood and the lost fragment of Codex 666. A story of sacrifice, of courage in the face of overwhelming darkness, and of one man's determination to stand against evil even when it cost him everything. Was it real? Was Samuel Blackwood an actual person who fought against an ancient evil, or was he merely a talented writer crafting a tale of terror? The historians say fiction. The researchers who handled his manuscript aren't so sure. And those who have heard the child's laughter in the ruins of St. Malachy Monastery on certain October nights, well, they have their own theories. What do you think? Are you brave enough to visit those ruins on All Hallows Eve? Would you recognize the signs if the dark promise was awakening in your own time? And if you did, would you have the courage to stand against it, as Samuel Blackwood did? Thank you for listening to this dark tale. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, what time it is where you are, and whether you believe Samuel Blackwood's story is fact or fiction. And if you've ever experienced anything similar, unexplained laughter, mysterious symbols, or the feeling of being watched by something ancient and malevolent, share your story in the comments. Who knows? Your experience might be connected to the lost fragment of Codex 666. Until next time, stay safe, keep your lights on, and remember, some promises should never be made, and some knowledge is too dangerous to possess. The dark promise may have been refused in 1604, but the darkness itself never truly dies. It only waits. Sweet dreams, if you can sleep after this.